Welcome back to Adeana's Diary. This episode, I want to talk about all of the different attachment styles. And I think sometimes the line gets blurred with narcissism and certain attachment styles. And my whole reason and purpose behind really creating this episode is a lot of times the victims of narcissistic abuse get labeled the narcissist when in reality, it's usually an attachment style they have, or they're reacting it's actually called reactive abuse. They're reacting to the triggers and kind of what the narcissist is doing. And so I want to shed light on some attachment styles that we have and what the difference is between the attachment styles and narcissism. So welcome back to the podcast. And if you are struggling, currently with a toxic relationship, then this will hopefully help you out. And it's kind of just nice to know about these things, just even getting into future relationships, right? We currently live in an era where we're completely inundated with psychological concepts. You can't open an app or read an article or really listen to a casual conversation without being hit by a wave of clinical terms used as everyday slang. We talk constantly about trauma bonds, gaslighting, love bombing, and most frequently of all, narcissism. And it's become our modern collective shorthand for a bad breakup or an emotionally unavailable person. But something very specific and quite dangerous has happened in this hyper awareness because these words are floating around without their true structural definitions. They've been weaponized. We're seeing a profound cultural phenomenon where the true architecture of human behavior is being flattened. And worst of all, we are living in a reality where the actual survivor of a toxic dynamic, the person who is systematically broken down, manipulated, and emptied out, is the one who gets slapped with the label of narcissist by the person who actually harmed them. It is actually a very terrifying, common psychological script. A highly manipulative, narcissistic individual will inflict harm, push your boundaries to the breaking point, and withhold affection until you freeze or explode in absolute desperation. And then the moment you react to the mistreatment, they calm down, they point their finger at you, and they say, see, look, you're the narcissist. Look how volatile you are. Look how selfish you're being. They take your reactive behavior, your desperate attempts to defend your boundaries or demand to be seen, and they twist it. They flip the script so completely that you find yourself laying awake at 3 o'clock in the morning, staring at the ceiling and wondering if your own heartbreak is proof that you are fundamentally defective. Now, I want to tell you right now, with everything inside of me, and I have been in this place, that if you are asking yourself that question, if you are sitting in the quiet of your own mind, genuinely wondering the possibilities, if you have the capacity to look in the mirror and critically examine your own behavior out of a desire to be a better human being, you're not a narcissist. Narcissists do not do that. They do not hold late night autopsies of their own conscience. They lack the fundamental machinery required for that level of self-awareness. So today we're going to unpack exactly why that is. We're going to explore the profound differences between a wounded relational attachment style, which is a fear-based survival strategy, and true pathological narcissism. We're going to look at exactly how these different attachment styles look in real life, how they are formed, and how they unconsciously act as an open door for narcissistic personalities to enter our lives and turn our realities completely upside down. We have to look at how our earliest experiences taught our bodies and minds to survive. Think of it this way. When we enter the world, we are entering helplessly, right? We cannot feed ourselves, protect ourselves, or navigate life on our own. Our survival is completely dependent on the emotional and physical availability of the people who raise us. And because of this, our tiny developing systems are hyper attuned to the adults around us. We are constantly monitoring them to figure out a vital equation. What do I have to do, or who do I have to be to ensure that I am loved, kept safe, and not abandoned? And the answer we find to that equation in our first few years of life create a permanent subconscious blueprint for how we expect the world to respond to us. And it becomes our default setting for intimacy, and relationships, and it's our unique attachment style. So let's first look at the baseline of emotional health, which is what we call a secure attachment style. Imagine growing up in a home where your emotional reality is consistently mirrored and validated. When you cry, someone comes to soothe you. When you are terrified, you are held and comforted until you feel calm again. But just as importantly, when you are curious, you are encouraged to step away, explore, and build your own independence. But you know with absolute certainty that if you fall, there is an unshakable safe arbor for you to run back to. Your parents aren't perfect, but they are emotionally stable enough to handle your big feelings without collapsing into tears themselves or screaming in anger or completely tuning you out. Now, when you are raised this way as a child, when you get into adulthood, that external safety becomes internal hardwiring. A securely attached adult carries a deep, quiet belief system that says, I am inherently worthy of love, and other people are generally safe, reliable, and capable of loving me. In romantic relationships, intimacy feels completely natural to them. They don't panic when a partner needs a weekend away or a night out with friends because their internal baseline is anchored in trust, not abandonment. When conflict happens, they don't experience it as an existential threat to the relationship. They see it as a bump in the road that can be ironed out through honest conversation. They can express their needs clearly without fear of rejection, and they can receive their partner's boundaries without feeling criticized or minimized. There is a fluid, beautiful balance between deep connection and absolute individual freedom. But for so many of us, that wasn't the landscape that we grew up in. For many of us, the home we grew up in was a place of unpredictability, conditional warmth, or profound emotional silence. And that is where the insecure attachment styles are born, starting with the anxious style. If you carry an anxious attachment style, your childhood was likely defined by a painful game of emotional hide and seek. Your caretakers loved you, but their presence was a moving target. One day, your mother or father might have been incredibly warm, attentive, and deeply affectionate. But the next day, they were completely swallowed by their own world, perhaps by depression, relationship warfare, financial stress, physical illness, or their own unhealed issues. Suddenly, without warning, that warmth vanished, replaced by a cold emotional vacancy or a volatile irritability. And to a child, this inconsistency is terrifying. It teaches your nervous system that love is real, but it's deeply unstable. You learn that affection can be pulled out from under you at any moment, and you won't see it coming. To survive this terrifying unpredictability, you develop a strategy of turning your emotional volume all the way up. Your system learned that if you were quiet, if you were easy, you would be completely forgotten in the chaos. But if you cried louder, if you clung to their pant leg, if you threw an undeniable tantrum, or if you became hyper vigilant, hyperachieving, and flawlessly perfect, you could force the caregiver's attention back onto you. You learned to become a master reader of human energy. You monitored the exact pitch of your mother's sigh, the heavy sound of your father's keys dropping on the counter, the microscopic tightening around their eyes. You learned that anxiety, chronic vigilance, and loud emotional protests were the only tools you had to keep the door of abandonment from opening. When an anxiously attached child enters adult romance, that exact same hypervigilance transfers entirely onto their partner. The core driving narrative of the anxious adult is I crave closeness with everything I am, but I am absolutely terrified that you're going to leave me. Because your baseline is set to expect abandonment, you are constantly scanning the relationship for threats. If a text message takes 4 hours to answer instead of the usual 10 minutes, your body doesn't register that your partner may be just stuck in traffic or busy at work. To you, that delay triggers an immediate survival panic. Your heart rate spikes, your stomach drops, and your brain starts screaming. They're pulling away, they're losing interest. And the emotional experience of an anxious person is a relentless, exhausting hum of insecurity. You feel like you are always chasing the relationship, always holding it up with your own two hands, always doing all the emotional labor to keep it alive. And when that anxiety peaks, you engage in protest behavior. These are subconscious, desperate attempts to force your partner to re engage and prove they are still there, that they still love you. It looks like double texting, demanding constant reassurance, picking a fight just to get an emotional reaction, or playing games like intentionally ignoring them to see if they will notice. It's a deeply painful way to love because your heart is genuinely screaming for safety, but the very tools you use to claw your way toward that safety often end up pushing people away. Now let's look at the avoidant attachment style and to truly understand a partner that has the avoidant attachment style, we have to look into a childhood home that was completely different from the anxious one, yet equally wounding. The avoidant style is forged in an environment of chronic emotional neglect, coldness, or severe boundary violations. As a child, whenever this person expressed vulnerability, cried, or reached out for emotional comfort, they were met with a hard, unyielding wall. They were shamed for having feelings. They were told to dry their eyes, dry your tears, don't cry. You're being too sensitive, too soft, or too dramatic. In other instances, the parents were intentionally cruel. They were just entirely spent, leaving the child to put themselves to bed, cook their own meals, and manage their own childhood terrors in complete isolation. A child's mind is biologically incapable of accepting the truth that their caretakers are incompetent or unavailable because that realization feels too dangerous. So they adapt. The child realizes that reaching out for connection results in the burning pain of rejection. Therefore, to survive, they make a subconscious decision to shut down their desire for connection entirely. Reaching out equals danger. Therefore, I will never depend on another human being as long as I live. I will solely rely on myself. And when an avoidant child grows into an adult, they wear their independence like a heavy suit of armor. They take immense pride in the fact that they don't need anyone. Their core narrative is closeness is a trap. If I let you scale these walls, you will suffocate me. You will control me. And the second you see who I really am, you will reject me anyway and leave. An avoidant adult can absolutely enjoy a relationship, but only up to a very specific individual boundary line. The moment the relationship demands deeper vulnerability, absolute emotional exposure, or long term commitment, their internal alarm system goes off. True intimacy doesn't feel like love to them, it feels like an existential threat to their freedom and survival. This is the exact moment they pull away. They suddenly become cold, intensely analytical, and detached. They will start picking your flaws apart under a microscope, convincing themselves that you aren't the right fit, or that you are too needy, too emotional, or too unstable, just to justify rebuilding their wall. They will dodge conflict by physically leaving the room, turning off their phone for days, or locking themselves behind a wall of silence. To the outside world, and most devastatingly to an anxious partner, the avoidant looks entirely heartless and cold. But beneath that unshakable exterior is a terrified, locked away inner child who genuinely believes that if they drop their guard for even a second, they will be completely destroyed. Then we encounter the most chaotic, painful landscape of all, the disorganized attachment style, which is often a mix of both anxiety and avoidance. This style is born out of severe trauma, chaos, or profound unpredictability within the childhood home. To understand disorganized attachment, you have to look at a terrifying paradox. When a child is frightened, their instinct contains an unyielding command: run toward your caretaker for protection. But what happens when the caretaker is the source of the fear? What happens when the parent is the one screaming at them or threatening their safety or acting completely terrifying and erratic? The child's system enters a state of absolute paralyzed shock. The drive to approach the parent for safety crashes head on into the drive to flee from danger. The child learns that the very person who is supposed to love them is the person who inflicts pain. There is no safe harbor anywhere in the world for them. Now, as an adult, the disorganized individual carries this agonizing civil war into their relationships. Unlike the purely avoidant person, they crave love and deep intimacy with a burning passion. They talk about it, they chase it, they want it, but the second they get it, their trauma blueprint triggers a massive emergency response. Their brain screams danger. They are too close, which means you are about to get hurt. And they live in a perpetual loop of, I hate you, don't leave me. They will pull you in with intense passion, share their darkest secrets, and build a beautiful moment of profound closeness. But then the sheer proximity triggers their panic. Suddenly, out of nowhere, they flip a switch. They push you away violently, manufacture a catastrophic fight over something trivial, or completely vanish from your life altogether. They swing wildly between hyper anxious, clinging, and freezing avoidance. It's an exhausting, heartbreaking roller coaster for anyone trying to love them, but it's an absolute living hell for the disorganized individuals themselves who feel permanently homesick for a home they are convinced does not exist. Okay, so now that we have mapped out these attachment styles, we have to look at a deeper, unsettling truth. These wounded attachment styles are the exact environments that narcissists thrive in. They act like an open door, inviting highly manipulative people into our lives. And if we don't understand how this happens, we become incredibly vulnerable to having our natural survival responses turned against us. Let's talk about the anxious attachment style first. If you are someone who carries this style, you are a narcissist's dream come true. Why? Because your entire blueprint is built around the fear of abandonment and the willingness to do whatever it takes to keep the connection alive. When a narcissist enters your life, they usually start with an intense period of praise and attention. They pour love onto you. They make you feel like you are the center of the universe. And to your anxious system, this feels like the ultimate safety you've been craving your whole life, really. The hunger that you have carried since childhood is suddenly being fed. But a narcissist's love is entirely conditional. The moment you express a normal human need or the moment you step out of the perfect script they have written for you, they withdraw. They become cold, critical, or distant. To an anxious person, this withdrawal triggers an absolute survival panic. Remember, your childhood blueprint taught you that when love disappears, you have to work harder, cry louder, or fix it. So what do? You turn your volume up. You try harder. You apologize for things you didn't even do. You minimize your own needs just to bring the peace back. A narcissist looks at this response and sees an endless source of emotional validation. They realize that they can treat you poorly, push your boundaries, and withhold affection, and your response will not be to leave them. Your response will be to chase them even harder. Your natural survival skill, your capacity to adapt and try to fix things, becomes the very tool they use to control you. They exploit your fear of being left to keep you small, compliant, and constantly working to earn their approval. But it isn't just the anxious style that attracts this dynamic. The avoidant attachment style is equally alluring to a narcissist, though in a very different way. A narcissist is fundamentally driven by a need for challenge, power, and superiority. When they meet an avoidant person who is highly independent, detached, and wears a thick layer of emotional armor, the narcissist doesn't see a wounded person, they see a castle to conquer. They view your independence as a challenge to their ego. They want to be the one who finally breaks through your walls, the one who makes you need them, because that proves how incredibly powerful and special they are. Now, in the beginning, the narcissist will use charm and persistence to scale your walls. And because avoidant people often secretly long for connection, but don't know how to initiate it, the narcissist's intent pursuit can feel safe initially because it requires the avoidant to do very little emotional heavy lifting. But once the walls come down and the avoidant person actually shows genuine vulnerability, the narcissist loses interest in the challenge and the game is over. The narcissist begins to devalue the avoidant, labeling them as cold, broken, or incapable of love. Now, when the avoidant person responds by doing what they always do, pulling away and retreating behind their walls to protect themselves, the narcissist doesn't respect that boundary. They use that withdrawal as a weapon. They point at your silence and say, see, look how cold you are. You are the one destroying this relationship. You're the monster who doesn't care about anyone else but yourself. They twist your fear of intimacy into proof that you are a malicious, heartless person, using your natural defense mechanism to frame you as the villain. This brings us to the most painful piece of this entire conversation, the moment where the script gets completely flipped on the victim. When a wounded attachment style collides with true narcissism, a highly destructive cycle unfolds. The narcissist will systematically push your boundaries, starve you of affection, gaslight your memory of events, and make you feel like you are constantly walking on eggshells. They will create a reality where you are never good enough, where your reality is constantly denied, or where your sanity is slowly chipped away. And eventually, everyone has a breaking point. No matter how anxious you are, no matter how much you try to keep the peace, your nervous system can only take so much, right? Before it cracks. And when you finally reach that point and you explode, you might scream, you might cry hysterically, or maybe you send 50 frantic text messages demanding to know why they're doing this, what's going on, or maybe you throw out wild accusations out of absolute maddening desperation. In psychology, this is known as reactive behavior. It is a completely natural, desperate human reaction to prolonged psychological abuse and manipulation. But the moment you react, the narcissist flips the script. They suddenly become completely calm, cool, and collected. They put on a face of absolute innocence. They point their fingers at your tears, your screaming, and your frantic text messages. And they say, see, you're the problem. Look at you. You are completely unhinged. Look how toxic and volatile you are. You're the narcissist. I am the one who is actually dealing with the abuser, right? They take a snapshot of your worst moment, the moment they intentionally pushed you into, and they use it as a weapon to destroy your credibility. They will take that snapshot to their friends, to their family, and even to a therapist, presenting themselves as the poor, long suffering victim of your chaotic behavior. And because you are a person who actually possesses a conscience, because you have the capacity to self reflect, you believe them. You look at your own explosion and you feel a deep, crushing wave of shame. You think, maybe they're right. Maybe I am the toxic one. Maybe my pain is proof that I am the problem. Now, I really need you to hear me clearly on this one. Your reaction to being mistreated is not the same thing as the mistreatment itself. Pushing back when you are being suffocated is a sign that your soul is still fighting for survival. It is not proof that you are a predator. So, how do we cut through this devastating fog of gaslighting? How do we look past the arguments, the confusion, and the flipped scripts to determine the absolute truth of what we are dealing with? We have to look for the two definitive, unfakeable metrics that a narcissist can never truly mimic, which is the presence or absence of true empathy and the underlying intention behind the behavior. True narcissism operates on a completely different psychological wavelength than an insecure attachment style. At the core of a narcissist is a constructed false self that is grandiose, perfect, superior, and completely entitled. And because they cannot tolerate their own human flaws, they view other people not as human beings, but as objects to be used to feed their ego and protect their fragile self image. And the absolute defining hallmark of this structure is a profound total lack of empathy. Empathy is the human capacity to imagine what another person is feeling, to hold their emotional reality within your own heart, and to let that awareness guide your actions so that you do not cause unnecessary harm to people. A narcissist completely lacks this capacity. Let's contrast how this plays out in conflict with a wounded avoidant partner versus a narcissist. When you confront a truly avoidant partner with your pain, when you stand before them weeping and telling them how much their distance hurts you, look closely at what is actually happening beneath their defense. They do not look proud. They don't look victorious. They look utterly frozen. They might stare at the floor, sigh heavily, or mutter that they can't do this before walking away. Their system is experiencing total emotional flooding. They're in a state of high shock because your intense emotion feels like a fire that they don't know how to put out. If you talk to that avoidant partner much later, when the conflict has died down and they feel completely safe from judgment, and you ask them if they even cared when you were hurting, an avoidant person will often show genuine sorrow. They will say, it completely tore me apart to see you like that. I hated it, but I felt so utterly helpless. And I felt like such a massive failure because I couldn't fix it. That my system just shut down. I had to run away to keep me from exploding. The avoidant person has empathy. Their capacity to feel your pain is fully intact, but their capacity to hold space and kind of handle it is where they struggle. Their survival strategy is to flee from the fire of emotion because they think it will consume them in some way. Their intention is self preservation, not harm. They are running from closeness because it feels dangerous to their survival. Now, let us look at a true narcissist in that exact same situation. When you stand before a narcissist with tears, broken heart, and the evidence of how their actions have crushed you, they do not look frozen. They look irritated. They look bored. They might even be looking on their phone, smirking or rolling their eyes because they lack empathy. Your tears do not register to them as a signal of human suffering that requires comfort. Your tears register to them as an accusation, an insult to their perfection, or a direct attack on their false self. Instead of withdrawing out of a need to calm their nervous system down, they use your vulnerability as a weapon to break you. They engage in gaslighting to warp your sense of reality, telling you that you are making things up, that you love to play the victim, or that you are completely unhinged. When a narcissist walks away from you while you are in agony, it's not a pause to calm their own body down. It's a highly intentional weaponized punishment designed to break your spirit, to force you into submission, and to make you bow down and apologize to them for the crime of being hurt from what they've done. This is the absolute line in the sand. This is the difference that changes everything. An avoidant person pulls away to protect themselves. A narcissist pushes you down to elevate themselves. The avoidant is running from closeness because it feels terrifying. The narcissist is manipulating closeness because power feels intoxicating. The avoidant's intention is self-preservation. The narcissist intention is domination, control, and malice. When you understand this, the heavy fog of confusion begins to dissipate. You can stop looking at the surface level behaviors and start looking at the structural reality of what actually happened in the relationship. If you're trying to heal, you have to ask yourself the hard, honest, unblinking questions about the person you love. Did they show a genuine capacity to care about your well being when there was absolutely nothing in it for them to gain? Could they celebrate you when the spotlight wasn't on them? Could they show authentic kindness to an animal, a child, or a stranger when no one was watching? Could they ever look at you, even for months after a storm, and say, I am so deeply sorry I hurt you? I was scared and I didn't know how to handle my own fear. If there is a total, consistent, unyielding absence of empathy across every single sector of their life, if they feel completely entitled to exploit your energy, if they never take true accountability for any mistakes, if they are utterly incapable of uttering a genuine, clean, I'm sorry without, but you made me do it, or even a smirk attached to it somewhere in the beginning or end, then you're dealing with a narcissist. And if this is the case, your path forward requires a completely different kind of medicine. It requires a radical, absolute acceptance that this person cannot change because you cannot fix a structure that refuses to acknowledge it has a crack. It requires you to build an iron wall of boundaries, to go completely no contact if possible, and to begin the long, dedicated journey of reclaiming your own mind from the madness of their gaslighting. Now, this brings us to the ultimate transformative realization that I want us to share today. Whether you have found yourself spinning in the anxious avoidant trap or trapped in the suffocating web of a narcissistic relationship, the ultimate truth of this diary is that our relationships do not happen to us, they happen for us. The outer world is a mirror reflecting our internal landscape. Our relational choices are powerful, illuminating signposts designed to guide us back to our own sovereign healing. Often, for those of us who carry an anxious attachment style, we use our preoccupation with fixing, changing, or earning the love of an unavailable person as a massive subconscious distraction. It's a shield that keeps us from facing our own deepest, darkest wound, the core belief that we are fundamentally unlovable just as we are. We build an internal myth that says, if I can just find the perfect combination of words, if I could just be patient enough, perfect enough, or understand enough, I can crack open their shell. And if I can fix them, if I can make them love me, then I will finally prove to myself that I am worthy of existing. But your worth is not a trophy to be won in the area of someone else's dysfunction. Your worth is an absolute non negotiable pre existing fact of your soul. You do not need to earn the right to be treated with tenderness. The journey toward true healing, toward cultivating real internal security, begins the exact moment you take all of that massive reservoir of love, attention, hypervigilance, and fixing energy that you've been outsourcing to an unavailable person and turn it 180 degrees completely back onto yourself. It is the slow, beautiful, and incredibly brave process of reparenting your own inner child. It starts with small, daily, grounded practices of absolute self awareness. The next time you feel that familiar burning spike of anxiety in your chest, the urge to send that text, the urge to beg for reassurance, or the urge to spiral into obsessive thoughts about what they're doing or thinking, pause. Don't sit with the discomfort. Breathe into the burning sensation in your chest. Wrap your arms around your own body. Hold yourself and tell your inner child, I see you. You are panicking right now because you think love is about to vanish. But look at me. I am here. I am never going to leave you. We are safe, and we are not going to beg for crumbs anymore. In doing this, you stop outsourcing your emotional stability to people who do not process the capacity to give it to you. Now, as we bring this episode to a close, I want you to remember that your current attachment style, if you have one, is not a life sentence. It's not an unchangeable identity. It is simply a collection of survival skills you learned when you were far too young to know any better. But you're not that helpless child anymore. You are the absolute author of your own story. You possess the conscious power to rewire your nervous system, to build beautiful, unshakable boundaries, and to choose connections that honor the absolute depth of your soul. Let go of the exhausting need to diagnose, fix, or understand the people who were committed to misunderstanding you. Drop the heavy burden of their projections. Turn your gaze completely back to the person who is listening to this right now. You are worthy of a love that feels like an unshakable, safe arbor, not a relentless, bloody battleground. Trust the timing of your healing. Trust the wisdom of your boundaries, and keep moving forward with your heart wide open to the truth of who you are. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Adeana's Diary. Until next time, keep writing your own story, keep honoring your sovereign truth, and take gentle, beautiful care of your heart. I will connect with you in the next one.